That Lass of LOWRIE'S by Francis Hodgson Burnett. Chapter 14. Mester Derrick, the rules is been broken again, on the quiet, be them as broke 'em afore. I name no names, and wouldn't say now, but our lives is in danger, and more than one. I only ask you to watch out. I am respectfully a honest working man with a family to feed. The engineer found this letter near his plate one morning on coming down to breakfast. His landlady explained that her daughter had picked it up inside the garden gate, where it had been thrown upon the gravel walk, evidently from the road. Derrick read it twice or three times before putting it in his pocket. Upon the whole, he was not unprepared for the intelligence. He knew enough of human nature, such human nature as Lowrie represented, to feel sure that the calm could not continue. If for the present the man did not defy him openly, he would defy him in secret, while biding his time for other means of retaliation. Derrick had been on the lookout for some effort at revenge, but so far, since the night Joan had met him upon the road, Lowrie outwardly had been perfectly quiet and submissive. After reading the letter, Derrick made up his mind to prompt and decisive measures, and set about considering what these measures should be. There was only one certain means of redress and safety. Lowrie must be got rid of at once. It would not be a difficult matter either. There was to be a meeting of the owners that very week, and Derrick had reports to make, and the mere mention of the violation of the rules would be enough. "Bah," he said aloud, "it is not pleasant, but it must be done." The affair had several aspects, rendering it unpleasant, but Derrick shut his eyes to them resolutely. It seemed, too, that it was not destined that he should have reason to remain undecided. That very day he was confronted with positive proof that the writer of the anonymous warning was an honest man with an honest motive. During the morning, necessity called him away from his men to a side gallery, and entering this gallery, he found himself behind a man who stood at one side close to the wall, his Davy lamp open, his pipe applied to the flame. It was Dan Lowrie, and his stealthy glance over his shoulder revealing to him that he was discovered, he turned with an oath. "Shut that lamp," said Derrick, "and give me your false key." Lowrie hesitated. "Give me that key," Derrick repeated, "or I will call the gang in the next gallery and see what they have to say about the matter." "Damn your eyes, does thou think as my time'll never come?" But he gave up the key. "When it comes," Derrick said, "I hope I shall be ready to help myself. Now I've got only one thing to do. I gave you fair warning, and asked you to act the man towards your fellows. You have played the scoundrel instead, and I have done with you. I shall report you. That's the end of it." He went on his way and left the man uttering curses under his breath. If there had not been workers near at hand, Derrick might not have gotten away so easily. Among the men in the next gallery, there were some who were no friends to Lowrie, and who would have given him rough handling if they'd caught him just at that moment, and the fellow knew it. Towards the end of the week the owners came, and Derrick made his report. The result was just what he had known it would be. Explosions had been caused before by transgressions of the rules, and explosions were expensive and disastrous affairs. Lowrie received his discharge, and his fellow workmen a severe warning, to the secret consternation of some among them. That the engineer of the new mines was a zealous and really amiable young man, if rather prone to innovations, became evident to his employers. But his innovations were not encouraged. An innovation costing nothing may be put up with, but an innovation involving an outlay is not easily tolerated. So, notwithstanding his arguments, the blast furnaces held their own, and, for the present, as the easy-natured manager put it, other matters, even more important, was set aside. "There is much to be done, Derek," he said. "Really so much that requires time and money that we must wait a little. Rome, etc." "Ah, Rome," returned Derek. "I am sometimes of the opinion that Rome had better never have been built at all. You will not discharge your imperfect apparatus for the same reason that you will discharge a collier, which is hardly fair to the collier. Your blast furnaces expose the miners to as great danger as Lowrie's pipe. The presence of either may bring about an explosion when it is least expected." "Well, well," was the good-natured response, "we have not exploded yet, and we have done away with Lowrie's pipe." Derek carried the history of his ill success to her niece somewhat dejectedly. "All this is discouraging to a man," said Derek, and then he added meditatively, "As to the rest, I wonder what Joan Lowrie will think of it." A faint sense of discomfort fell upon her niece, not exactly easy to understand. The colour fluttered to her cheek, and her smile died away, but she did not speak, merely waited to hear what Derek had to say. He had nothing more to say about Joan Lowrie. When he recovered himself, as he did almost immediately, he went back to the discussion of his pet plans, and was very eloquent on the subject. Going on one evening, Derek found himself at a turn of the road only a few paces behind Joan. He had thought much of her of late, and wondered whether she was able to take an utterly unselfish view of his action. She had a basket upon her arm, and looked tired. He strode up to her side, and spoke to her without ceremony. "Let me carry that," he said. "It is too heavy for you." The sun was setting redly, so perhaps it was the sunset that flung its colour upon her face as she turned to look at him. "Thank you," she answered. "I'm used to carrying such light loads." But he took her burden from her, and even if she had wished to be left to herself, she had no redress, and accordingly submitted. Influences long at work upon her had rendered her something less defiant than she had been in the past. There was an element of quiet in her expression, such as Derek had not seen when her beauty first caught his attention. They walked together silently for a while, Derek glancing often at the handsome face and feeling curious about it, as he invariably did. It would have looked different, he fancied, if she had felt any resentment against him, but he wanted to arrive at something more definite than deductions drawn from outward appearances. After his usual manner, he grappled with his difficulty boldly and without pretence at concealing what he meant. "I should like to hear you say that you do not blame me," he said, with abrupt determination. She knew what he meant, it was evident. "I canna blame you for doing what were right," she answered. "Right? You thought it right. Why should I? You could have done no other." "Thank you for saying that," he returned. "I have thought once or twice that you might have blamed me." "I didna know," was her answer. "I didna know as I'd have done out to mak' you think so ill of me." He did not find further comment easy. He felt as he had felt before, that Joan placed him at a disadvantage. He so often made irritating mistakes in his efforts to read her, and in the end he seldom found that he had made any advance. Annie's Barham, with her problems and her moods, was far less difficult to comprehend than Joan Lowrie. Liz was at the cottage door when they parted, and Liz's eyes had curiosity and wonder in them when she met her friend. "Joan," she said, peering over the door-sill at Derek's retreating figure, "isn't that one of the masters? Isn't it the Lunnon engineer?" "Yes," Joan answered briefly. The pretty silly creature's eyes grew larger with a shade of awe. "Isn't it the one as your feyther's so bitter again?" "Yes." "And isn't he a gentleman? He dunna look like a working man. His class dunna fit him like common folks. He mun be a gentleman." "I've heard folk call him one," dryly, "and if his claws fit him right, he mun be one, I suppose." Liz looked after him again. "Aye," she sighed, "he's a gentleman sure enough. I've seed gentlemen enough to note look on 'em. Did. hesitating fearfully, but letting her curiosity get the better of her discretion nevertheless. "Did he court thee, Joan?" The next moment she was frightened into wishing she had not asked the question. Joan turned round and faced her suddenly, pale and wrathful. "Nay, he didna," she said. "I am na a lady, and he is what thou calls him, a gentleman.